Today we are restarting Newhaven. Also, Newhaven is now Bridgeport. Let the chaos begin. So today is going to be a full speed build just because I want to get to that point where we were with Newhaven. But we're starting off with the beginnings of Bridgeport. Because I didn't want to give myself an aneurysm trying to pronounce Newhaven. Not that Newhaven is any difficult to pronounce. It's just that my brain just didn't want to call it Newhaven. My brain was just like, no, it's Newhaven, and we're going to bully you into thinking that it is. So yeah, now it's Bridgeport because I'm not going to mispronounce Bridgeport. Give it 5 seconds and I will. But anyways, I have already done the roundabouts going into the city. It's pretty much the same thing as with Newhaven, but in Bridgeport I just immediately started with, alright, I want stamps. Or at least basically have one neighborhood or like one row of buildings and then be able to duplicate those around. Because that's kind of how you would build like a neighborhood. It's just like one stamp that you can just stamp everywhere. So there's going to be a lot of places where it's like, this is like 3 times the same street. Yeah, because that's realistic. That's how it usually goes when it comes to like city or urban design. It's like, yeah, you will get the same things, especially if it's like, I would say not directly after like Second World War, but kind of after like a decade after that, where you will get a lot of those neighborhoods where it's just like, yeah, this street is just stamped everywhere. So that's how we are starting. And also just building a lot of parks, because I did not realize that right from the get-go you can place trees and everything. Actually, my advice is to place trees right from the get-go, because I thought that like, oh yeah, the trees that you place, they're just going to be tiny forever. No, this game is actually that in depth that the trees grow, which I'm just going to say like, yay, for realism and such of like, yeah, trees, when you plan out your parks and such, you are going to have to deal with small trees because you're not going to uproot a full-grown tree from somewhere else to place to your park. You're just going to have to do with saplings. However, just for the looks of Bridgeport, I was just like, yeah, can we have the option to also just plant full-grown trees? Because it takes a while for the trees to actually grow. But anyway, so we have all of these streets just stamped, or neighborhoods just stamped around, and then filling up the areas that wouldn't be able to be stamped with parks. And just having like some patches with flowers, some patches with just trees. But yeah, today is just going to be a full speed build because I want to do a little bit more real-time talk when it comes to City Skylines. But I also know that like, yeah, my biggest strength lies in just voiceovers, because then the true chaos comes out. Because when I do real-time talk, it usually ends up a bit mumbly if I go on for a bit too long. Because I don't really have a brain for explaining things. Like, my way of explaining things is like, yeah, this is how I do it. Oh, you want to know like the exact in and outs? Yeah, my brain just doesn't compute that. Anyway, so there's also going to be a lot of times where I'm just like tracing a road, retracing it, tracing it again, retracing it. Just because I want the zoning to just absolutely line up with everything that I want. Anyways, so when it comes to Bridgeport, as I said, the reason why I renamed it Bridgeport instead of just continuing with Newhaven is because I would give myself an aneurysm. Also, I just like the idea, like, when it comes to Bridgeport, like the main thing, also with Newhaven, this was going to be the plan. I just wanted to have a city full of bridges. I don't know why that's the main theme of the city, but it is. So Bridgeport makes a bit more sense then of like, oh yeah, a city with like 100 bridges. Yeah, of course it's going to be named Bridgeport. But anyways, back to the actual builds. So again, it's just a lot of stamping. This is like a very common just in any, like I'm saying like, oh yeah, a decade after like the Second World War, this is what happened a lot, which is true because then it was like the housing crisis. so you needed to build a lot of houses very quickly. Also, there was like a population boom right after, or not right after, kind of the decade after. So you also had to account for that. So there was, yeah, after the Second World War, there were just a lot of houses built. And so you needed to just have like one like plan that you could just duplicate or stamp everywhere with like somewhat of like a comfortable way of living, but definitely the main focus was just housing as much people as possible. And I would think that Bridgeport would probably have been such a town, because it is, well, how do I properly say this? But there is a case of like, oh yeah, small towns that after the Second World War just boomed because they were like designated as like the towns that should grow. I am still kind of salty that the village that I grew up in didn't get that. But then I also realized after, oh yeah, first of all, there's not the amenities here already. Like, you know, you kind of want to build off of something that's already existing. Also, this is something I later found out, but my village is like in the middle of like a lot of archaeological sites. So you couldn't expand cheaply, because isn't this the same thing? Like, I've heard of this being a thing with like the London subway or metro or underground, that like you dig anywhere in London, you will find something archaeological. The same thing goes for like Rome, where it's like, oh yeah, you dig somewhere into the ground, oh, suddenly you have like a Roman villa or something. Well, not to that extent, but just like there's like pottery or anything like just something archaeological. I think in London it's mostly plague pits though, which means a lot of corpses and such, which kind of makes sense for London. I don't know why. It's just that like when it comes to London, I always just think vampires and death. I really don't know why. Anyways, I also made a boulevard right across the bay, well, not bay, across the river, or not across, what is it? Following the river. Here's again the thing of like, this is the fun of doing the voiceovers after the fact. It's just like, yeah, you're really seeing Poison being a dumbass. Because it's just, oh yeah, I want to talk about this and this. Oh, this is something that I'm building right now. And then my brain is just quickly trying to figure out, all right, what are the words? But yeah, I wanted to make this boulevard going along the river just because that's kind of like just a good thing. Just because when it comes to like routes for walking, for driving, just for any kind of travel, if you want a route to be very clear, you usually want it to follow some kind of like water or some kind of natural, how do you say this, line. So if you have like a river, if you want to have like a good walking path or bicycle path, or not really bicycle paths or walking path, but like bicycle routes, have it so that your path is following that river. Because then you can't really easily get lost, because it's just like, oh yeah, I need to follow this river. Easy. Or I need to follow this like row of trees, or this landmark, or this sort of natural line that's going. Like it could be a ridge or like a cliffside. It could be anything, as long as just a clear line next to whatever route you want. Like that's a thing, like when it comes to like Rotterdam, because that's my main example city, because that's the city I have the most experience with. Like the major walking routes and cycling routes all go along the river, because it's just an easy thing to like navigate with, because it's always just like, oh yeah, I need to follow the river. You can also have this thing if you don't have like such a natural line that you can like make your routes follow. Then it can be like, oh, I need to go from this building to this building to this building. So you would need like signature buildings to go across or go along. I don't know why. For some reason, I just have a problem with the word along today. I mean, I have a problem with English in general, but I mean, we're talking about the guy who's got sidetracked off building a city to, yeah, London is filled with dead bodies, and if you dig anywhere on the ground, it's just like, yeah, plague pits. Also, for those people who don't know what a plague pit is, it's basically a mass grave for people who died of the bubonic plague or the Black Death. Yeah, what was it, like 1/3 or like 2/3 of Europe died? So yeah, any of the big cities, there will probably be some plague pits somewhere. Some died, well, a lot of times, if there's construction going on, you might find one. I'm curious if Amsterdam or Rotterdam has. Well, Rotterdam has been bombed flat, so I don't know if there's much there. But then bombs don't really go underground, or at least not to that extent that they would. I don't know. I'm just talking out of my ass by this point. So, I'm also dying, it seems. I think I just swallowed air, but also liquid, like my own saliva, and it went down my lungs. And then my lungs were just like, yeah, we're going to pass away now. Anyways, I have tears in my eyes right now. I don't know if that's going to stay in the video, but this was just like most of the times, if I like cough or anything, maybe burp even, I will just cut it out or redo the voiceover, because usually it really messes up the voiceover. But this was just such a weird sound that I'm just like, maybe I should keep this, because I mean, it fits. Like, oh, I'm talking about Black Death and such, and I get fucking possessed by a demon trying to strangle me or choke me. At least get my consent first. God. Anyways, let's go back to the actual thing that we should talk about, which is Bridgeport. So we are building the first bridge of Bridgeport. I really still dislike the highway. Those were the first bridges, but we didn't build them, so I'm not going to consider those. But when it came to the small island in the river of Bridgeport, I was just immediately like, yeah, this is too small for any buildings. So this is probably going to be either like some kind of natural reserve or, well, natural. Yeah. Is that the right word? I don't know. I'm a dumbass sometimes. Like you think like, oh yeah, Poison, he graduated. Like he is an urban design graduate. You might think I'm smart. Yeah, in certain situations. When it comes to speech, no. When it comes to speech, it's just like, yeah, a 5-year-old would probably be better. But anyways, when it came to this small little island, it was either going to be just like a nature reserve. That's the actual word, not natural reserve, nature reserve. Or just, it was probably going to be just left to nature for like wild birds as such. Because that's also like a big thing in cities or surrounding cities. You kind of just want to keep nature alive surrounding it. But it would either be a nature reserve or just left to nature, or it would be a park. I kind of did both, where there's a large site with just walk paths and such, but then there's another smaller section that's just fully nature. I'm really curious when the mods start getting released of like, oh, what can I do with that? Because I just want to place a bunch of rocks. Yeah, other people want like a stable game, like a very optimized game, and I'm just like, I want to place rocks. Now, this is kind of a good segue actually. The stability and performance of Cities Skylines. I'm actually kind of surprised by it. Now we're building the industrial area. It's pretty much the same as in Newhaven, so I'm not going to really talk a lot about that. But when it comes to the stability and the performance of the game, I am actually kind of surprised. Because going into Cities Skylines, I really thought like, oh yeah, I'm going to really struggle. But it's pretty much okay. Like, is it as good as Planet Zoo? No. But then my benchmark for Planet Zoo is also Naturalis, which I don't think a lot of PCs would be able to handle Naturalis. So it is. Is it more stable than Planet Zoo? I mean, it has crashed on me a few times. I'm talking about Cities Skylines right now. So Planet Zoo hasn't actually crashed on me in like a year. So that's the thing. But then Planet Zoo also doesn't have to like simulate like every person in the city having like a full-on like career and life and such. So yeah. Anyways, Cities Skylines just more stable than I thought. Performance is better than I thought. Is it great? No. But it's better than I thought. And it's manageable. And I don't really require high frame rates. Again, like my benchmark is Naturalis and just Planet Zoo in general. I am really used to 20 and 10 FPS. That's not a good thing, but I'm so used to it. Also with like other games, I've found out like, oh yeah, I'm playing Planet Zoo and it's actually really dark. Like my brightness settings are really low, but I've gotten so used to it that any spooky game now, like any kind of dark haunted thing, is just like, this looks very bright to me. Oh yeah, because most games I play like I'm a fucking mole. Like the brightness settings on Planet Zoo, I never really messed with them, but I did find out like, oh yeah, this game is... I've made this game really dark actually. I haven't changed it. To me it still feels like Planet Zoo to me is just very light. And then I play any other games that it's like, you think that this is dark? While I'm in the middle of like a fucking cavern. I'm just like, this is bright. I can see everything. Yeah, Poison, because you don't know how to change the settings in Planet Zoo. And you've just gotten so used to it that you're basically now a vampire. Also, being a vampire would kind of suck. Because first of all, you see everybody who you care about die. And then third, you aren't able to go outside. Not that that's a problem for me because I'm a mole. I would say like, oh, I'm a fucking vampire. No, I'm not classy enough for that. I will feast on chicken nuggets any given day. But yeah. I don't know really why I immediately went on the sidetrack of like vampires. Anyway, so we're building up the second island. And damn, am I happy that I figured out that I could place trees right from the get-go. And just build massive parks. Even though the game doesn't really see them as parks, I just like building parks. And also just immediately going over every intersection, just immediately being like, alright, these streets wouldn't have any parking and would probably have trees lining the street. Just because I'm basing Bridgeport off of Dutch cities and Dutch towns, because I am Dutch. I'm a Dutch urban design graduate, which I'm going to shout forever because I'm very proud of it. But my main point of reference is going to, of course, be Dutch cities. And then, yeah, a lot of streets will just be lined with trees. Like only a few streets, like when it comes to like residential streets. Oh yeah, there you would have parking on the side of the road. But most cities or most streets, it's just like, yeah, you're not supposed to park here. Also, it just looks nice to have trees lining the streets. I don't know if the trees surrounding the city streets will actually grow up, but I hope so, because can you imagine all of the trees that I've placed so far, all grown up? Bridgeport is going to be a fucking forest, and I'm happy with it. And what I'm not happy with is the bridge for the highway. Now the thing here is, when it comes to the bridge for the highway, I wanted a little bit more of a different looking bridge. I also wanted this bridge, like these are two bridges. Because I needed to keep them separate because they can't intersect Again, I'm really happy if the modding tools start happening and I can make these bridges intersect and make them look like one bridge. But it's such a big like statement bridge for such a small river. It just doesn't feel realistic at all. Even though after that, I immediately started building the highway just going along the ocean edge. I think Bridgeport would... Yeah, Bridgeport is... it is the River Delta map because I wanted to keep the same map for Bridgeport as I used for Newhaven, because Bridgeport is supposed to be Newhaven 2.0, but when it comes to just this bridge, it doesn't feel right. Again, really happy when we get the mods and such and get like more different kinds of bridges and such, because it's such a large bridge for such a small crossing that it doesn't work. I mean, it would work for like, oh yeah, this is a real statement bridge. But Bridgeport right now is it's not big enough to really have a statement bridge. Like Newhaven is tiny. I mean, at this point, we're still at the small village level. This is also because I really like seeing all of the streets as such lined out and none of the buildings yet, because that just gives me inner peace. I did place a wall to go along the highway because this part of the highway is so close to the city that it's just like, yeah, you're going to put sound barriers in because the highway is just going to create a lot of noise, which you don't really want in the city. Like, a city on itself is already going to be noisy, but you want to still keep it to a certain healthy level, because too much noise is not healthy at all. And also, too much noise, you know, you want to have some kind of wildlife still in the city. This might be a weird thing, but like, yeah, you want like birds and such to still be in the city. You don't want your city to become a concrete haven, because that's just going to depress everyone. Like, you want trees and everything, just because concrete haven doesn't make anyone happy. I think there's been like research on that I can't really like... I know that there's been research towards like, oh, people in cities do better when there's like parks and greenery and such nearby. I don't know the name of the research off my head, because the way that I've learned things is like, yeah, you have Google for that. It's kind of like, oh yeah, in math class, it's like, why do I need to learn how to do this? Like, I have a calculator. And I kind of get it for like, oh yeah, math class, you kind of want to know how to do that. When it comes to like urban design and such, it's probably better to just look it up to be sure that you're like quoting the right thing and not just like, oh yeah, this is based on an assumption of something I've read. No, you want the explicit sources and such. So yeah, I'm not quoting it here, but there has been research into like, oh, what would be the best environment? And when it comes to cities, it's like, yeah, you want greenery, you want public space and open space and such. There's like even research been done, and I know this because it actually was part of like my internship project to research it. But there's also research done on like how far apart you should like build high buildings. Mostly thinking of like well, not skyscrapers, because in the Netherlands we don't really have skyscrapers, because most of like the big cities are in the west of the Netherlands, which is a kind of swampy area, or at least you don't really have a solid ground. So building skyscrapers in the Netherlands is very expensive, because you need to really dig into that foundation, because otherwise your skyscraper in a few years is just going to be swallowed, because the building will just sink in the swampy ground. Yeah, and that's also why, like, oh yeah, it's easier to build skyscrapers in, let's say, the United States, or not really just the United States, but in certain areas it's just easier to build high because like you need the proper underground or just the proper ground. Because if you have like a very swampy, soft ground, then it just isn't going to work. Or it is going to work, but it's going to be hell of expensive. So when it comes to Bridgeport, it's probably going to have skyscrapers just because of looks, but also because I don't think like Bridgeport, the ground is not like at the same level as the water. As you could have seen with the boulevards and such, there's quite a lot of ground or height to where the city is. So actually the main island, like the big island that I actually want to build on, probably would be very expensive to build skyscrapers on, just because it's lower to the water level, which means that usually the ground is wetter, which means the ground is softer, which means you have to really build into that foundation because it's just going to otherwise sink into the ground. Like, it's just a lot easier to build skyscrapers or build anything really big on like rocky ground. Anyways, moving on to the overpass, to the highway, because again, new Bridgeport, this is going to be a thing for a while, where I'm just like, Newhaven, no, it's now Bridgeport. You specifically changed it so that you wouldn't give yourself an aneurysm trying to pronounce Newhaven, but you're messing up still. Anyways, back to the actual overpass. So the main thing with Bridgeport right now, it's too small for the intersection actually that the game gave me. Like, that's an intersection that a large city would probably have. Bridgeport right now has, I think by the end of this video, 2,500 inhabitants. That's not large. That's like a large village. So they wouldn't have like a really large intersection because it's like, this is not a main point of interest. Like a bigger city of like 10,000 people. Well, would you call that a city or like a town? It's kind of like where you're thinking of, because maybe it's like a small village in other countries and it's like a larger town in the Netherlands. I think the closest town, because we still don't call it a city, but the closest town to me has like 40,000 people, and that's still a town, so it's not like 10,000 people wouldn't be called a city. But yeah, let's just go for Rotterdam, which has like I think 1 million, 6 million or 7 million. Those would have like those large intersections that the game gave you. A small town like Bridgeport with 2,500, yeah, they're going to get a small overpass or like a very small intersection, because it's like, yeah, there's not going to be a lot of people here using it. Maybe later down the line we can upgrade this intersection to something larger as Bridgeport continues to grow. But right now, it's tiny. And it needs a tiny intersection. And that's also how we're going to end today's video. With me basically getting a heart attack over this intersection because I wanted to have more... Well, I needed to have the main connection points. But connecting those to the actual road going into Bridgeport was... it was difficult. Anyways, the next video is probably going to have more real-time sections. Right now, if you like this video, throw a aneurysm at the like button. Don't do that, but hey, hit that like button. And if you want to see more, throw a bridge at the subscribe button. Anyways, have a wonderful day, guys. Bye-bye.